Good evening. In case you didn't know by now, my name is Damien, the tall, friendly atheist dad, from the Tall, Friendly Atheist Dad podcast, and also from www.tallfriendlyatheistdad.com. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a wonderful evening. In my part of the world at the moment, we are I think we're 3 days into a 7-day lockdown. Our numbers aren't looking too bad right now, but yeah. Unfortunately, a couple of major sites in my particular area have been listed as COVID exposure sites, and yeah, when the news came that they were exposure sites, certainly panicked because the last thing I want is to have to take another COVID test. So anyway, this is part 5 of my reading of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norman L. Geisler and Frank Turek. Sorry I haven't been reading too much of this one recently. I've been reading up on Kent Hovind's PhD thesis, as well as the book I originally wanted to read and finally found, which is The People of the Abyss by Jack London. So anyway, I'm just going to quickly get myself comfy and set up. And yes, I'm actually reading in bed because I like reading in bed. It's winter at the moment where I am in the southern hemisphere, so you do need your blanket. Sorry. And okay, so let's just working out exactly where it was. Sorry for your ears. Okay. So this is I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, starting at the very bottom of page 37. Truth is discovered. There are many other truths about truth. Here are some of them. Truth is discovered, not invented. It exists independent of anyone's knowledge of it. Gravity existed prior to Newton. Truth is transcultural. If something is true, it is true for all people, in all places, at all times. 2 + 2 = 4 for everyone, everywhere, at every time. Truth is unchanging, even though our beliefs about truth change. When we began to believe the earth was round instead of flat, the truth about the earth didn't change. Only our belief about the earth changed. Beliefs cannot change a fact, no matter how sincerely they are held. Someone can sincerely believe the world is flat, but that only makes that person sincerely mistaken. Truth is not affected by the attitude of the one professing it. An arrogant person does not make the truth he professes false. A humble person does not make the error he professes true. All truths are absolute truths. Even truths that appear to be relative are really absolute. For example, I, Frank Turek, feel warm on November 20th, 2003. May appear to be a relative truth, but it is actually absolutely true for everyone, everywhere, that Frank Turek had the sensation of warmth on that day. In short, contrary beliefs are possible, but contrary truths are not possible. We can believe everything is true, but we cannot make everything true. This seems obvious enough, but how do we deal with the modern assertion that there is no truth? A couple of cartoon characters can help us. So just quickly stop there. In some ways, yes, I get where they're coming from. And in some ways, I actually agree with them. That, if we take the idea that truth is what comports with reality, then yeah, the Earth being round is truth. Yeah, I think you have to kind of work out truth and facts. And I think Aaron Ra said it best. He said the truth is what the facts are. But yeah, it's. I think this is where, if you're not, I can say, not grounded in with a good epistemology or a good philosophy, then you can be swept in by people who say things that sound good, but then you get carried away with. So let's say they say one right thing, but saying one right thing doesn't make the next 10 things you say correct. You still have to back up what you say, and yeah. But this last one, all truths are absolute truths. No, because even if Frank Turek says he feels warm on November 20th, 2003, is he warm because he's in front of a heater? Is he warm because he has the flu? Is he warm because he's inside a mobile phone, inside a nuclear radiation, a nuclear power plant, and it's going under meltdown, and his insides are being cooked by the radiation? That's kind of a. Yeah, so anyway, on back to the book. The Roadrunner Tactic. If someone said to you, I have one insight for you that absolutely will revolutionize your ability to quickly and clearly identify the false statements and false philosophies that permeate our culture, would you be interested? That's what we're about to do here. In fact, if we had to pick just one thinking ability as the most valuable we've learnt in our many years of seminary and postgraduate education, it will be this: how to identify and refute self-defeating statements. An incident from a recent talk radio program will demonstrate what we mean by self-defeating statements. The program's liberal host, Jerry, was taking calls on the subject of morality after hearing numerous callers boldly claim that a certain moral position was true. One caller blurted out, Jerry, there's no such thing as truth." I, Frank, scrambled for the phone and began to dial furiously. Busy. I wanted to get on and say, "Jerry, to the guy who said there is no such thing as truth, is that true?" I never did get through. And Jerry, of course, agreed with the caller, never realizing that his claim could not possibly be true, because it was self-defeating. A self-defeating statement is one that fails to meet its own standard. As we're sure you'll realize, the caller's statement, "there is no truth," claims to be true. So I'm switching hands here. It's like saying, "I can't speak a word in English." If someone ever said that, you would obviously respond, "Wait a minute, your statement must be false because you just uttered it in English." Self-defeating statements are made routinely in our postmodern culture, and once you sharpen your ability to detect them, you become an absolutely fearless defender of truth. No doubt you've heard people say things like, "all truth is relative," and "there are no absolutes." Now you'll be armed to refute such silly statements by simply revealing that they don't meet their own criteria. In other words, by turning a self-defeating statement on itself, you can expose it for the nonsense it is. We call this process of turning a self-defeating statement on itself the Roadrunner tactic, because it reminds us of the cartoon characters Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. As you may remember from Saturday morning cartoons, the coyote's one and only quest is to chase down the speedy Roadrunner and make him his evening meal. But the Roadrunner is simply too fast and too smart. Just when the coyote is gaining ground, the Roadrunner stops short at the cliff's edge, leaving the passing coyote momentarily suspended in the air. supported by nothing. As soon as the coyote realizes he has no ground to stand on, he plummets to the valley floor and crashes in a heap. Well, that's exactly what the Roadrunner tactic can do to the relativists and postmodernists of our day. It helps them realize that their arguments cannot sustain their own weight. Consequently, they crash to the ground in a heap. This makes you look like a super genius. Let's take the Roadrunner tactic to college to show you what we mean. Okay, so here's a thing here about the relativists and postmodernists of our day. Again, this is the thing. Like I never met anyone who said there is no truth, and I've never heard anyone say there are no absolutes. And I think I have heard someone say only a Sith deals in absolutes. So yeah. And again, this isn't defeating rational, honest skepticism. It's just going, well, if we can defeat relativism, we've defeated atheism. Ha ha ha. Yeah, let me turn the page. The Roadrunner goes to college. The Roadrunner tactic is especially needed by today's college students. Why? Because if you listen to many of our university professors, they'll tell you that there is no truth. What amazes us is that parents all over the world are literally paying thousands of dollars in college tuition so that their sons and daughters can be taught the truth, that there is no truth. Not to mention other self-defeating postmodern assertions, such as all truth is relative. Is that a relative truth? There are no absolutes. Are you absolutely sure? And it is true for you, but not for me. Is that statement true just for you, or is it true for everyone? True for you, but not for me, may be the mantra of our day, but it's not how the world really works. Try saying that to your bank teller, the police, or the IRS, and see how far you get. And that's exactly the same as you weren't there, but I have the word of someone who was. When it comes to evolution or, Big Bang cosmology or even, refuting the account of the resurrection. Well, you weren't there. Well, and then I say, well, look, if you have that logic, I'd love for you to be the judge at my tax fraud trial. Hey, you weren't there to see me steal the money. You weren't there to see me commit fraud. Therefore, not guilty. Thank you very much. Maybe that's my own Roadrunner tactic. Anyway, back to the... But yes, this whole thing, again, he goes on about, the postmodernists and the relativists. And it's like, but I can't quite explain it, but I just feel that all this stuff about, all truth is relative. Is that a relative truth? There are no absolutes. Are you absolutely sure? It's very juvenile. It's very, I don't know, it's just, it doesn't feel like it's been written by, it feels like it's been written by someone who's there to score cheap points rather than someone who's actually trying to build a case or look into a case. Yes. Hello. How's the baking going? What's being baked? Sorry? You can say it louder, it's okay. Oh, so when I walk out the room, you're happy to speak into the microphone and do my introduction for me. But when I ask what cake, people know what you sound like. It's okay. Chiffon. I don't know what chiffon is.
Chiffon.
Okay, cool. Of course, these modern mantras are false because they are self-defeating. But for those who still blindly believe them, we have a few questions. If there really is no truth, then why try to learn anything? Why should any student listen to any professor? After all, the professor doesn't have the truth. What's the point of going to school, much less paying for it? And what's the point of obeying the professor's moral prohibitions against cheating on tests or plagiarizing term papers? Now that is a better argument. Sometimes, sometimes argument from consequences is a bad way of deciding the truth. But when it comes to morality, argument from consequences is actually like consequences are a good way of looking at the good or bad of particular action. So that paragraph just there is actually where you should be going, not this, is that relative to you or for me or what? It's kind of, it's a juvenile stuff. Anyway, back to the book. Ideas have consequences. Good ideas have good consequences. And bad ideas have bad consequences. Indeed, many students realise the implications of these bad postmodern ideas and behave accordingly. If we teach students that there is no right and wrong, why are we surprised when a couple of students gun down their classmates, or a teenage mother leaves her baby in a trash can? Why should they act right when we teach them there is no such thing as right? C.S. Lewis revealed the absurdity of expecting virtue from people who are taught that no virtue exists. In a sort of ghastly simplicity, we remove the organ and demand the function. We make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honour and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and bid the geldings be fruitful. The truth of the matter is this: false ideas about truth lead to false ideas about life. In many cases, these false ideas give apparent justification for what is really immoral behaviour. For if you can kill the concept of truth, then you can kill the concept of any true religion or any true morality. Many in our culture have been attempting to do this, and the past 40 years of religious and moral decline trumpet their success. Unfortunately, the devastating consequences of their efforts are not just true for them, they are also true for all of us. Such truth exists. It cannot be denied. Those who deny truth make the self-defeating truth claim that there is no truth. In this regard, they are a lot like Winnie the Pooh. They answer a knock at the door by saying, "No one is home." Now let's see how the Roadrunner tactic can help us answer the skeptical claim that truth cannot be known. This is just trying to think. Okay, I agree. Ideas have consequences. Good ideas have good consequences. Bad ideas have bad consequences. But I'd also like him to. I like these guys to apply, the Christian theology, apply this to Christian theology. If you believe that this life is inconsequential to our eternal life, then what you're basically saying is that this life is the joke life, and then when you die, your real life starts now. And hey, by the way, you couldn't believe the bad evidence for what really is the truth. Therefore, pain and suffering for you, kind of thing. Or it's like, nice life you've got there. Shame if something happened to it, eh? Yeah, the mob boss analogy. But yes, false ideas about truth lead to false ideas about life. Bad data in, bad epistemology, bad logic, bad results. You're right there. Oh, you're doing shadow puppets. All right, cool. But yeah, so it's like I get the feeling that these guys are applying, this, standard to atheism and relativism and like their opposing positions, but have they applied it to their own? Can truth be known? Knock knock. Evangelical Christians believe that they ought to obey Jesus' command to make disciples of all nations, Matthew 28:19. In order to help Christians carry out this great commission, D. James Kennedy created a door-to-door evangelism technique called evangelism explosion. If you're a Christian, the EE technique allows you to quickly ascertain where a person is spiritually. After introducing yourself, you are to ask questions like these to the person answering the door. 1. Can I ask you a spiritual question? And 2. If you were to die tonight and stand before God, and God were to ask you, why should I let you into my heaven? What should you say? Most people are curious enough to say yes to question 1. If they say, what do you mean by a spiritual question? You go ahead and ask them the second question. As for the second question, the EE manual predicts that the non-Christian will usually give the good works answer. Something like, God will accept me because I'm basically a good person. I haven't killed anybody. I go to church. I give to the poor. In that case, the EE manual tells you to respond with the gospel, literally the good news, that all, including you, have fallen short of God's perfect standard, and no good work can erase the fact that you've already sinned. But the good news is that you can be saved from punishment by trusting in Christ, who is punished in your place. Actually, before I turn the page, how are you there? You're a sleepy duck, are you? Oi. What's? You're a sleepy duck. So, if someone came to my door and said, can I ask you a spiritual question? Well, why not just ask me a normal question? Like, can I ask you a question about your spiritual beliefs? Like a spiritual question. It's like, why don't you just ask me, can I ask you a maths question? It's like, if someone said, can I ask you a spiritual question? I go, well, what is spiritual? And the second one, if someone asks you if I would like to stand before God, I'll say, well, it's hard to know exactly what I'd say. I'll say, God, if God asks, why should I let you to my heaven? I would ask you, why didn't you provide more evidence of your existence? Why did you have, well, actually, God, who are you? What are you? What have you ever done for me? How do I know you exist? There's actually a few questions, but yes. Here, I'm going to turn the page. Back to the book. While this technique has been very successful, some non-Christians do not respond to the two questions as expected. For example, one evening I, Norm, decided to take EE to the streets along with a fellow member of my church. Here's how it went. Actually, so evangelism explosion. It's like, whoever named that really, oh boy, just really needs to, think up some better names. It reminds me of a church group I was in once called Campus Christian Movement. It's like, then the number one question we got is, where are you moving to? Oh, it's just a name made up by someone else. Probably back in the 80s, or late 70s or something, to reflect 1980s American evangelicalism. Evangelism explosion. Sorry, just cringy. Back to the book. Knock, knock. Who's there? A man came to the door. I stuck out my hand and said, hi, my name is Norm Geisler. This is my partner Ron, and we're from the church at the end of the street. I'm Don, the man replied, his eyes quickly sizing us up. Immediately, I jumped into action with question 1. Don, do you mind if we ask you a spiritual question? No, go ahead, Don said boldly, apparently eager to have a Bible thumper for dessert. I laid question 2 on him. Don, if you were to die tonight and stand before God and God would ask you, why should I let you into my heaven, what would you say? Don snapped back. I'd say to God, why shouldn't you let me into your heaven? He wasn't supposed to say that. I mean, that answer wasn't in the book. After a split second of panic, I offered up a quick prayer and replied, Don, if we knocked on your door seeking to come into your house, and you said to us, why should I let you into my house? And we responded, why shouldn't you let us in? What would you say? Don pointed his finger at my chest and sternly replied, I would tell you where to go. I immediately shot back, "That's what God is going to say to you." Don looked stunned for a second, but then narrowed his eyes and said, "To tell you the truth, I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist." Really? I'm going to smell that in a few seconds.
Good.
No. You're an atheist? That's right. Well, are you absolutely sure there is no God? I asked him. He paused and said, "Well, no, I'm not absolutely sure. I guess it's possible there might be a God." "So you're not really an atheist, then you're an agnostic." I informed him, because an atheist says, "I know there is no God," and an agnostic says, "I don't know whether there is a God." "Yeah, all right, so I guess I'm an agnostic then," he admitted. Now, this was real progress. With just one question, we moved from atheism to agnosticism, but I still had to figure out what kind of agnostic Don was. So I asked him, "Don, what kind of agnostic are you?" He laughed as he asked, "What do you mean?" He was probably thinking, "A minute ago I was an atheist. I have no idea what kind of agnostic I am now." "Well, Don, there are two kinds of agnostics," I explained. "There's the ordinary agnostic who says he doesn't know anything for sure. And then there's the ornery agnostic who says he can't know anything for sure." Don was sure about this. He said, "I'm the ornery kind. You can't know anything for sure." Recognizing the self-defeating nature of his claim, I unleashed the roadrunner tactic by asking him, "Don, if you say that you can't know anything for sure, then how do you know that for sure?" Looking puzzled, he said, "What do you mean?" Explaining it another way, I said, "How do you know for sure that you can't know anything for sure?" I could see the light bulb coming on, but decided to add one more point. "Besides, Don, you can't be a skeptic about everything, because that would mean you'd have to doubt skepticism. But the more you doubt skepticism, the more you become." He relented. "Okay, I guess I really can know something for sure. I must be an ordinary agnostic." Now we were really getting somewhere. With just a few questions, Don had moved from atheism through ordinary agnosticism to ordinary agnosticism. I continued, "Since you admit now that you can know, why don't you know that God exists?" Shrugging his shoulders, he said, "Because nobody has shown me any evidence, I guess." Now I launched the million-dollar question. "Would you be willing to look at some evidence?" "Sure," he replied. This is the best type of person to talk to. Someone who is willing to take an honest look at the evidence. But willing is essential. Evidence cannot convince the unwilling. Since Don was willing, we gave him a book by Frank Morrison titled Who Moved the Stone? Morrison was a skeptic who set out to write a book refuting Christianity, but instead became convinced by the evidence that Christianity was indeed true. In fact, the first chapter of Who Moved the Stone is called The Book That Refused to Be Written. We visited Don a short time later. He described the evidence presented by Morrison as very convincing. Several weeks later, in the middle of a study of the Gospel of John, Don accepted Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Saviour. Today, Don is a deacon in a Baptist church near St. Louis, Missouri. Every Sunday morning for years, he's driven the church bus through the local neighbourhood to pick up those kids whose parents wouldn't come to church. His ministry has a special meaning to me, Norm, because two men like Don, Mr. Costy and Mr. Sweetland, picked me up with a church bus more than 400 times. Every Sunday from when I was 9 until I was 17. I was in a position to accept Christ at 17, largely because of that bus ministry. I guess it's true what they say. What goes around comes around, even if it's just the Sunday school bus. Okay, we're half an hour in, so I'll go for maybe one and a half more pages. So if I had these two guys come at my door and ask me these kind of questions, well, said it. Ask me a spiritual question. Okay, I'd like you to define spiritual. It's probably the way I'd just think about it now. Yeah, that's how I'd reply, because you can tell me what you think spiritual is, but what actually is it? And that's kind of where. And then So then this line about, I would tell you where to go, and then I immediately shot back, that's exactly what God is going to say to you. But hold on, if the whole point of God is that he's actually, a loving and, a kind and compassionate God who wants to see us come to him, then, he wouldn't, I don't know, something about it just makes me think that he would, look at petty things like, oh, I'm going to tell you where to go. Because that means God is still, highly angry and aggressive and antipathic. Unless, so if we think about it for a sec, so if God is looking for, like, how can I say, if God is excluding us from heaven, now there would be two reasons why God would let us into heaven. One, because we're good people. We loved others. We didn't abuse. We did more good than harm. And that then, yeah. See, if God is a good God who is focused on the well-being of people here on earth, then the standard for entry into heaven should be, how we looked after our fellow man, how we treated people, whether did we break the law, did we, by whatever criteria. The problem though is that the criteria for entry into heaven isn't being a good person. The criteria for entry into heaven is, to use a crude word, obsequiousness. If we accept that Jesus Christ, if we accept that, we are sinners, if we accept that we're lowly people, if we accept that we're ants who could be crushed, but, we're begging for mercy from this, from this God who could crush us like an ant, then God will spare us if we confess how wretched we are to him. And that means that God isn't interested in, human well-being. All he's interested in is whether his ego gets stroked by you, confessing how miserable you are, and then accepting the human sacrifice that Jesus is, as the way to, well, I'd say overcome that. But then the problem is that even if you accept Jesus as, your Lord and Savior, you're still a miserable wretch who still needs saving, and depending on your theology, some people go with once saved, all saved, or always saved, which is okay. But then there are some denominations who go, if you walk away from salvation, that's it, you've lost it. And there doesn't seem to be a clear answer on the issue. But that's the thing. So, like, if I went to heaven and saw God, I'd say, "Well, God, why are you so self-centered that you can't even handle complaints about things?" So, well, yeah, like if God refuses to let, if God refuses to let me into heaven, then it's like, I think that's a mark of a badge of honor on me that someone as self-centered as God doesn't want me to hang around him. Okay, that's. But again, it's like, that's just an aside. But then we go to where was it? So you're an atheist. That's right. Are you absolutely sure there is no God? I'm not absolutely sure. You're not really an atheist. You're an agnostic. I would also say that I'm not absolutely sure. For me, on the Dawkins 7-point scale, I'm probably a 6.5, probably 6.5, because I'm not absolutely sure, because there's so only Sith deals in absolutes, but there's always that room for error. You could be wrong about something, and how can I say, like, and that's the thing, like, the honest person admits he could be wrong about stuff, but just because you don't know anything for sure doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that like, I suppose it depends on how you define know, how you define certainty. It's all a bit of a, and I feel this is how Geisler and Turek play their word games, and given that this is all in a section called the Roadrunner tactic, it is about word games. It's not actually about establishing the case that God exists. It's just about how to play word games and how to trick people into believing something with bad evidence. So like in that particular sort of thing, so like I would go, look, I don't know for sure, but I can tell you that without a definition of a God, and without any objective evidence that this God actually exists, and without the presumed acceptance of the existence of this God to back up the case that this God exists, then God could exist, but to a statistically insignificant percentage, is what I say. And just like, and the problem is you could also ask the same about Zeus, Are you absolutely sure there is no Zeus? Well, not absolutely sure. I guess it's possible there might be a Zeus. So you're not really an Zeusist, It's like, I'm sure they would love that kind of logic applied to their own. And this is kind of what I mean, is that they're happy to apply these kind of word games to other people's faiths. But when you apply it to theirs, they go, oh, no, you can't do that. We have the truth. Oh, no. Well, I'm sure that's not what they actually do, but it's like they weasel out of, There's a thing. And so this is why I go with epistemological minimalism, in that, well, look, you tell me what a God is, and then you prove the case that there is, and then we'll go from there. And an atheist and agnostic, I see them as, two sides of the same, they're both on the same side of the fence, they're just at different spots by the pool, kind of thing. So, let's, now this book, Who Moved the Stone, can't say I've read it, I may add it to the reading series, but, but I do have Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ, and that is a very, not a very good book, I gotta say. I probably should call it Lee Strobel's Case for Christ, because that was what convinced him. For a guy who made his name as a journalist, it's like, if that convinced a professional journalist that Jesus existed, it's like, oh boy. You're right there. Wait, son. Anyway, back to the book. Can all religions be true? The moral of the EE story is that complete agnosticism or skepticism is self-defeating. Agnostics and skeptics make the truth claim that truth claims cannot be made. Do we? They say that truth can't be known, but then claim that their view is true. You can't have it both ways. Again, this is the whole thing about, moral relativists. It doesn't talk about actual. Actually, he does mention skeptics, but he hasn't actually. Yeah, how can I say? Well, I've never heard a skeptic say that truth claims cannot be made. I've never heard anyone say that. It's just that all skeptics do is like, we're not going to accept your truth claim until you've given us good reason to. So we've established that truth can be known. In fact, it's undeniable. But so what? Can't all religions be true? Unfortunately, it's not just the secular world that's confused about this question. Even some church pastors have trouble with it. Seminary professor Ronald Nash heard a good example of this. He told us of a student who went home to Bowling Green, Kentucky for Christmas break a couple of years ago. While on break, this Bible-believing student decided to be adventurous one Sunday and attended church that he had never attended before. But as soon as the pastor uttered the first sentence of the sermon, the student realized he had made a mistake. The pastor was contradicting the Bible. The theme of my sermon this morning, the pastor began, is that all religious beliefs are true. The student squirmed in his seat as the pastor went on to assure each member of the congregation that every religious belief they held was true. When the sermon was over, the student wanted to slip out unnoticed, but the heavy-set, robed pastor was waiting at the door, bear-hugging each passing congregation. "Son," the pastor boomed upon greeting the student, "where are you from?" I'm from Bowling Green, sir. I'm home on break from seminary." "Seminary? Good. So what religious beliefs do you have, son?" "I'd rather not say, sir." "Why not, son?" "Because I don't want to offend you, sir." "Oh, son, you can't offend me. Besides, it doesn't matter what your beliefs are. They're true. So what do you believe?" "Okay," the student relented. He leaned towards the pastor, cupped his hand around his mouth, and whispered, "Sir, I believe that you are going to hell." The pastor's face turned bright red as he struggled to respond. I guess I made a mistake. All religious beliefs cannot be true because yours certainly aren't true." Indeed, as the pastor realized, religious beliefs cannot all be true because many religious beliefs are contradictory. They teach opposites. For example, conservative Christians believe that those who haven't accepted Christ as their Saviour have chosen hell as the ultimate destination. It's often overlooked, but many Muslims believe the same about non-Muslims. They're headed for hell as well. And Hindus generally believe that everyone, regardless of beliefs, is caught in an indefinite cycle of reincarnation based on works. These contradictory beliefs can't all be true. Actually, I'll finish this section. In fact, world religions have more contradictory beliefs than complementary ones. The notion that all religions teach basically the same thing, that we ought to love one another, demonstrates a serious misunderstanding of world religions. While most religions have some kind of similar moral code, because God has implanted right and wrong in our consciences, we'll discuss that in chapter 7. They disagree on virtually every major issue, including the nature of God, the nature of man, sin, salvation, heaven, hell, and creation. What are you doing? You bored, eh? Think about it. The nature of God, the nature of man, sin, salvation, heaven, hell, and creation. Those are the biggies. Here are a few of those big differences. Jews, Christians, and Muslims believe in different versions of a theistic God, while most Hindus and New Agers believe that everything that exists is part of an impersonal, pantheistic force they call God. Many Hindus believe that evil is a complete illusion, while Christians, Muslims, and Jews believe that evil is real. Christians believe that people are saved by grace, while all other religions, if they believe in salvation at all, teach some kind of salvation by good works. The definition of good and what one is saved from varies greatly. These are just a few of the many essential differences. So much for the idea that all religions teach basically the same thing. Alright, so I'm going to stop the reading there for tonight. The next section, so page 46, is titled Truth versus Tolerance. I've always wondered how real that stories pastors make up for an analogy are. I can't say I've ever heard of a pastor go, all religious beliefs are true. The whole point of a church is that, that specific denomination, you believe along the lines of that specific denomination. But look, as a particular certain Australian underworld figure said, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Anyway, it'll be a good night from me. I hope you've enjoyed this reading. If you have any feedback, feel free to let me know. Twitter @TFADpod, Facebook.com/TFADpod, or head over to Facebook, www.talkfriendlyatheistdad. Otherwise, look after yourselves, stay safe, stay rational. Good night.